welcome to 6 Guitars, the electric bass series. A couple videos ago, we took the neck and inlaid a whole bunch of Padauk fret dots across it. Showed you how to do that, showed you how to get it squared up and everything, and how to get them inlaid. Now what we need to do is, you can kind of see that there, how they're raised all the way across. So obviously we need to come back and we need to bring them back true with the fretboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a radius sanding block, which this one happens to be from StuMac. It's a 16, which is the same radius as the fretboard. I'm going to use a piece of 100 grit sandpaper. You can use 80. Really doesn't matter. You want something kind of aggressive. And come in. I'm going to take off all of these dots, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that right now. All right, taking off the dots is pretty straightforward. My bench is getting a little rough here, so I've got a piece of MDF that's nice and flat underneath here that I can lay my fretboard on. I've got a bar clamp, which I'm going to check the faces up, make sure that there's no extra glue on there to mar the fretboard up here. I'm going to go ahead and get that set down so that way it doesn't move. I'm going to take one more and check the face on it again. And do the same thing up here. Kind of keep this guy steady while we're doing it. No sense in fighting this thing moving as you're sanding. And that's another thing too. I used to never do it. I used to think it was a pain in the butt, but it takes 2 seconds to clamp something down before you sand it. Because a lot of times you're trying to hold it and you're losing half of your stroke as this thing's moving around while you're trying to chase it down as you're trying to sand. If you clamp it down, it takes an extra 2 seconds, and you can go right across it really nice. So these Padauk dots are sticking up pretty high. So I'm not going to come back with a chisel. I've had bad luck with that before. Come back and hit it and you catch the wrong piece of grain and it pops out below the fretboard height. So it takes a few extra seconds to do it with the sandpaper, but it never fails. So I'm going to do it with the sandpaper. So I'm going to do is take my sandpaper, wrap it around my block, try to get nice and tight under the radius as possible. And I'm just going to set it on here, being mindful that I keep it centered, all the way across, nice and even. And I'm going to go ahead and start sanding a few of these off. I'm not going to bore you with this whole procedure, but you can see as we're looking at all this dust showing up right here, and all this dust on here, it is going to go very, very quickly with this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up off camera, and then we'll kind of come back to it here in a second for fretting. Alright, so I went across it, and I took the sandpaper here, and you can see that it's nice and smooth all the way along. And came out pretty nice. So what I'm going to do now, before I fret it, I'm going to get a piece of my fret wire, and I'm going to check the end, make sure there's nothing hanging down, and it's a nice regular T-shaped end, and nothing's crimped over or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is, because these are pre-cut slots, I'm going to take this wire and I'll put it right on the edge, and you can kind of see how that is right there. So it's sitting right on the edge. And the whole point of this is you drag the wire all the way along. This is just a quick, easy way to check to make sure all of your fret slots are dug deeply enough. And as I was checking this one, the other side is fine, but on this side, 24, 23, 22, 21, yeah, 21, 22, 23, and 24, all of those slots aren't deep enough. So what would happen if you just went ahead and pounded the fret wire into this thing, these would be higher. These are going to be your buzz points when you start fretting these frets that are right up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the bench. I'm going to take just my regular fret saw, go ahead and saw those out, get them down to the right depth, so that way everything is going to work out when we go to fret this instrument. And then I will go ahead and start fretting it. Alright, the next thing that I'm going to do here before fretting is I'm going to cut all my fret wire. Now the way that I do this, I've got an end nipper here, and what I did is a little bit different to this. You can kind of see it there. My end nipper nips real flat here. There's no indent. There used to be a lot more metal here, and I went ahead and ground that down. You can do that on a grinder. I did it on a belt sander. So the nip on here is really precise, so it doesn't leave a whole lot of wire behind. So what I'm going to do is I just start at 1 and I work my way all the way down to 24. I like to cut them all and just kind of leave them on the bench here as we're going. You lay this across here, so that way there's a little bit hanging over on this side and a little bit hanging over on this side. And you go ahead and line it up, get the nippers nice and close to where it needs to be, and cut it. Now sometimes you're going to get a little bit of end deformation. And you can kind of see that here. If you do get that, you just need to check and go ahead and line it back up. Line it back up and check to make sure that your ends can actually go in. And this fret wire is already kind of pre-curved a little bit. I ran it through the fret bender just a moment ago. So stuff's already curved a little bit, it should go in pretty nice, but that one's going to fit, so that little end deformation really isn't much of an issue. So go ahead and set that one down. Proceed to number 2. I'll try to get on here really even this time. That one's good. And then number 3. Basically just keep on heading down the line and cutting off segments of fret wire all the way until you get to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this until I get all my fret wire all lined up, and then we'll go ahead and move to actually putting the frets in, and I'll show you how to do that with a special caul that I've got to help kind of distribute the force. On the shop floor here, this might be a little unorthodox, but it works. This is a radius hammering caul, and I just made this by slowly sanding a radius on here that matches my fretboard. The two white lines that you see I already filled with glue. I'm just using a little piece of veneer and just kind of working it in there and working it through. What I'm going to show you now is just the way that I do the frets. I usually come down to the ground to do this because it's a harder surface, it doesn't give, and unlike like the workbench, it doesn't bounce around or anything like that. So I'm just going to come on with my first piece of fret wire here, and go ahead and get it on there. I'm going to tack in my two ends, just like that. I'm going to come along with the caul, put it on there, and just give it a couple hits. And what that does is it sets the fret uniformly, and it sets it in nice and tight. And the glue squeeze out is easily removed with a wet rag. I definitely recommend removing the glue squeeze out because it will be miserable to get off later. Remove it all with a wet rag. Go ahead and check the end to make sure it's seated well, and it looks like it is. And then I'll go ahead and move to the next one. Actually, get rid of a little bit of that squeeze out right now. Go ahead and move to number 2. This will be kind of the same thing. Going to set the end just a little bit. Set the other end. Chase it, make sure it doesn't come back out again. And then come back with the caul. And set it in. That gives you a really, really nice, dead even set without any gaps or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and fret the rest of this now. Alright, so the fretboard is done, as you can see here. And all the frets on it, the edges still need to be trimmed, and I'll show you how we do that on belt sander, actually. Coming up probably later on in another video.